everyone! Welcome to this special end-of-year edition. We will be getting you ready for 2025 with the latest trends in consumer behavior, business and payment technology. Joining me today is David Daly, who is the head of Worldline Discovery Hub, as well as being the mastermind behind our biannual reports and monthly newsletter, Navigating Digital Payments. David, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me. Real pleasure to be here and looking forward to a great discussion.
Thank you. So let's start. David, which trends and innovation do you and your colleagues think will have the biggest impact for our customers and their businesses in 2025?
That's a great question. So I think I'd probably look at it from 4 different angles. Firstly, consumer attitudes and how are they changing? Secondly, what new trends are we seeing in business? Thirdly, what new technologies are we seeing and how are they being used? And then probably finally, a look at sort of specific payment trends that are emerging.
Let's start with the consumer attitude. What do you see there?
So with consumer attitudes, I think the big one that we're seeing a continuation of really is around social responsibility. So consumers really wanting to buy from brands where they feel that they connect and share common values. And that can be around things like protecting the environment, but it can also be other things like working conditions or, for example, giving back to the local community.
Do you think that payments has a role to play with that?
Yeah, so I think very specifically around the environment, there is the question of how can we make accepting payments more environmentally friendly. And we actually sponsored a study that looked at this, and one of the big conclusions was actually that the best thing we can do is encourage people to move away from cash and as much as possible pay digitally, because digital payments have a much smaller carbon footprint when compared to cash. And then of course there's the question also of how can we make digital payments even more environmentally friendly, and there we saw 2 main opportunities actually. One is around, wherever possible, not printing a physical receipt, and then the other is around encouraging people to pay with their mobile devices, because then you don't have the environmental cost of producing the plastic card.
Do you have any other examples to share?
So maybe more around the giving back to the local community. We've seen a real interest in round-up donations. So this is where at the point of sale, the customer has the chance to round up the payment to the nearest, say, euro, and then the difference is donated to a good cause. And what we've seen is consumers really like that, because it's a way that they can make a contribution, but without having to make a fixed long-term commitment. And just to give a sense of how well this is working, for example, with our partners WorldCo in Spain, we saw 442,000 euros donated in this way last year. So it really is a case of lots of small contributions adding up to a big number in the end.
Are there any business trends that are expected to become more important?
So I think the one that is already important and I think is going to become even more so is around marketplaces. So any platform that is connecting buyers and sellers.
How will this affect retailers?
For retailers, marketplaces can be a way to expand their customer reach, test new markets, enter new areas, but also, particularly with bigger retailers, we're more and more seeing them become marketplaces themselves, and that then creates some new challenges for them around payments, because they also have to manage payouts, KYC, tax reporting.
Clear. Thank you, David. Which technology trends are going to be significant?
So I think the ones I would pick out are the ones that are going to have an impact on the customer experience. And I'd probably choose SoftPOS, so being able to accept a payment on a standard mobile or tablet, Immersive Experiences, and also digital identity.
Starting off with SoftPOS, why do you mention that?
So traditionally, people have really seen SoftPOS as a kind of low-cost solution for very small or micro merchants. But more and more now we're seeing big retailers using it as a way of allowing their staff to come from behind the checkout, from behind a desk, and move around the store, help customers, give advice, show them products. And then the great thing is that with a SoftPOS solution, when the customer decides they want to buy, they can then complete the purchase there and then and accept the payment. They don't have to send the customer off to somewhere else in the store to wait in line to pay at a checkout with a till. And of course, a big part of that is making the customer experience better, but also for the retailer, this is about avoiding the sort of danger zone where the customer's decided to buy, but if they're forced to go somewhere else and then wait in line, they might change their mind and the sale might be lost.
What about immersive experiences?
By immersive experiences, I really mean either virtual reality, so that's where you have a headset on and you are completely immersed in a different world, or augmented reality where you are looking through some kind of glass, some kind of lens, and you are seeing objects and data superimposed on the real world around you.
And do you really think it will be important in 2025?
That's a good question, because it feels quite futuristic, doesn't it? But we did some consumer research last year that found that most consumers across all generations are actually expecting brands to provide these kind of immersive shopping experiences. And what I would say is that whilst most people today do not own a virtual reality headset, most people do own a mobile phone, and a mobile phone is one of the ways that you can look at the world and have the augmented reality experience. So actually that's technology that is here now and is being used today.
What kind of use cases does this open up?
So I think the obvious one for virtual reality is probably around leisure and tourism, allowing people to look around a hotel or a resort before they book a holiday. But also we're seeing in retail more and more use of augmented reality to help people see how a product is going to look inside their home. So you might see a sofa in a store, see a sofa online, but you don't know how it's going to look in your living room. With augmented reality, you can then actually see how the product is going to look inside your home.
And the final technology trend you mentioned was the digital identity?
Yes, so with the eIDAS 2 regulations coming soon, everyone in Europe will have access to a digital identity, and they will be able to use that digital identity anywhere inside the EU. So for citizens, it's going to be a lot more convenient. It's also going to give them a lot more fine-grained control over exactly what attributes about themselves they share with businesses or with other entities. And for the shopping experience, it can also make it easier as well. So for example, if you're providing vending machines that sell age-restricted products, then digital identity is a way of allowing people to easily buy those products, whilst at the same time making sure that when you're selling them, you're compliant in terms of making sure that only people who are allowed to buy them can buy them.
The last topic I want to cover with you was what payment trends people need to be watching out for 2025.
So I'd pick out two. One is quite specific, which is around payment orchestration, and the other is a bit more general, and it's about the rise of alternative payment means, which is really non-traditional payment means, so anything that's not a sort of credit or debit card payment.
Let's start with the payment orchestration. Why is that relevant?
I'm probably wildly oversimplifying here, but I see payment orchestration as being important for three main areas. Firstly, is really personalising the payment experience for the end consumer, letting them pay in a way that they want to pay. Secondly, is increasing acceptance rates, so reducing the number of transactions that are declined. And then thirdly, behind the scenes, it's about optimising the cost of accepting the payments. And you can imagine that's relevant really in any area, but where I think it's particularly beneficial is for people buying non-essential items. So of course, if you're at the supermarket buying your groceries, if the payment doesn't work first time, you're going to find another way to pay because you want to eat. But if it's more discretionary, more an impulse buy, you're online in a game choosing something, then actually if you can't pay in the way that you want to pay, or if the transaction gets declined first time, there is a real danger that you'll just give up and then the sale gets lost.
You also mentioned new payments means. What did you have in mind there?
So I'd probably call out three. There is the sort of increasing interest in account-to-account payments. There is the sort of rise of more and more mobile wallets for payments. So for example, EPI's Wero. And then also looking a little bit further ahead, central bank digital currencies, and in particular, the digital euro, which is on the horizon.
With account-to-account payments, what are the benefits and why is that interesting?
So I think where we're seeing the most interest in account-to-account at the moment is typically for quite high ticket value items. And that can be things like tax collection for a government or recurring utility bills, but can also be other things, booking airline tickets, hiring a car, luxury goods, anything where the ticket value is quite high.
And you also mentioned digital euro, right?
Yes, so the digital euro, that's obviously a little bit further in the future. Certainly next year, banks are not going to be providing access to digital euros to citizens. Shops are not going to be expected to accept digital euro payments. But I think what we will see next year is a very clear picture of what the implementation of the digital euro will look like and also what the timeline is going to be.
Thank you, David, for those fascinating insights. Exciting times ahead of us.
Definitely. So it's going to be critical, I think, for all businesses to understand these trends and make the most of them in order to get ahead of the game.
Thank you for being with us. We wish you a wonderful end 2024 and a bright, successful 2025. Thank you for your trust.